An American vice president once said that the moral test of a government is how it treats those in the dawn of life, those in the twilight of life, and those in the shadows of life. This bill is about protecting those in some of the darker shadows of life, Kiwis who've become so trapped in the cycle of poverty and debt that they're forced to borrow money from predatory fringe lenders just to live from one day to the next. These lenders, and let's call them by their true name, they're loan sharks, target the most vulnerable members of our society and charge them obscenely high interest rates, sometimes 1,000 or 2,000% per annum once the true rate is calculated. And they have no intent of ever seeing their loans repaid. That's not how the business model works. Instead, they profit off the rapidly compounding interest and the subsequent seizure of the debtor's assets once the debt's been sold on to a repossession company. So this behaviour is morally repugnant. I'm proud that Carol Beaumont has sponsored this piece of legislation which seeks to regulate the interest rates that lenders can charge and require them to take responsibility for ensuring that those taking out loans can actually pay them back. I want to congratulate Carol Beaumont for her campaign on this issue and for her determination to pursue it, whatever the outcome of tonight's debate. She can be assured of the continuing support of all members on this side of the House. Sir, the changes set out in the Credit Reform's Responsible Lending Bill have never been as urgent as they are now. Times have never been better for loan sharks. Unemployment's up, families are struggling to make ends meet. At least 75% of taxpayers earn under $40,000 a year, a huge group who've been left worst off as a result of this year's budget and the price inflation and wage deflation we are seeing in its wake. Despite this, the government refuses to act. Heather Roy has just trotted out the claptrap that we've heard from the officials at the Ministry of Consumer Affairs for the last 5 years. Her excuse for turning her back on the vulnerable people targeted by loan sharks is the area is too complex and that the credit contracts law is currently under review. Well, that's not good enough, Minister. Struggling families out there can't wait another year for your review and for solutions that may not even hit the target as far as what's required. We have to take action now, and for National and ACT to refuse to let this bill go to a select committee is to let down all Kiwis. This bill was drafted with input from a number of individuals. I want to mention former Professor Duncan Webb and Andrew Shan in particular, and to credit them both for their assistance. Andrew Shan has campaigned tirelessly on behalf of those adversely affected by loan sharks. First, by taking the issue to the National Party and asking them in good faith to act on this issue, but only to be ignored. He's authorised me to say that his father, now 91 years of age, is at home listening to the debate tonight. Mr Shan Senior is a former National Party electorate chair. His family's support for the National Party goes back to that party's foundation in 1936. He's appalled that the party today lacks the decency to see that supporting this legislation is the right thing to do. And while we're talking about National Party pedigrees, if she doesn't mind me putting it that way, I want to acknowledge the presence of the Mayor of Porirua, Jenny Brash, in the gallery tonight, and the Deputy Mayor of Porirua City, Latia Ahoy, because Porirua City has been fantastic in supporting this measure because they see every day the damage that these loan sharks do, and they understand the need to regulate. Mr Speaker, I want to challenge the government to do what's morally right, to protect the most vulnerable, struggling New Zealand families from those who are exploiting them. They owe it to people like the family in Mount Albert last year, whose house I was present at, when the repo agent came to call on behalf of budget loans. That agent's conduct was disgraceful. And at the time, sir, Budget Loans was and still is owned by Sinotech Limited. Sinotech is run by convicted fraudster Alan Hawkins. Its fifth largest shareholder is a subsidiary of the New Zealand Guardian Trust. Its sixth largest holder at the time was the family trust of Craig Foss, chair of the Finance and Expenditure Committee, although I note that the trust has now disposed of that shareholding. Sir, clearly there's a lot of money to be made by those who choose to profit from the activities of loan sharks. Shame on them, because they do it off the backs of the most vulnerable in our society. And shame on the National Party and on the ACT Party for leaving us in the company of countries like Nigeria who failed to act to protect the vulnerable. Sir, that failure is a betrayal, and we need to make sure that it is remedied.